Now we are recording. What is your name?
Ruth Kerrr.
Okay, Ruth, do you have read and understood the information sheet 15, 12, 14 version 1.0?
Yes.
And do you agree to take part in this study?
Yes.
And the data use will be used only for these study purposes?
Yeah.
And do you understand that your participation is voluntary?
Yes.
And you may withdraw at any time. And would you be happy to be contacted for further research if you agree with it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So, Ruth, could you tell me just a little bit of your experience as a teacher training, and as a MOOC developer?
Okay.
This will be
My teaching experience is that only in the context of online teaching or teaching in general.
Well, teaching in general and online teaching in particular. Yes.
Okay. Well, because I'm quite old, then my experience of teaching goes back a long way to the sort of technological era. So I have a long experience, both in the classroom, both in the private and public sector, and then of course slowly we moved into TEL. Beginning with CAL, computer.
Computer assisted language learning. Yes.
Because I started life as a language teacher, and then I've moved forward from there. And at university level now, I still teach language to normal classes of second year degree students. And then at a different university, I've been involved in I actually work for the Online Learning Centre, and so I've been involved in platform creation and specifically as well MOOC production creation and aspects of...
For how long?
The last 6 years I've worked in the Online Learning Centre.
So, in your university, let's say that this is your university here in Federico II, and could you please tell me a little bit about the MOOCs in this university, and with a focus on why the university has decided to take MOOCs on board? Just a short...
I'll try and be brief. The university had to have a closed number policy because there were far more applications. Sorry, start again. We're a public university. In Italy, the cost of the university fees is actually really low. And so we tend to be on the side of education as a public good. We're funded mainly by the state, not by the tuition fees.
Yes.
And then, as I say, we had to introduce a closed number policy in many departments, not only medicine and architecture, where it's perhaps a bit more common, but there were, far more people wanting to come here than we had places for, just quite simply in terms of classroom space and in terms of... So I think that it was part of an overall policy, from on high, to be able to offer this online alternative, which would ease up a little bit the classroom space available. So there's also issues of internationalization, a kind of question of moving with the times. MOOCs are branding, and I think that would explain also our move into edX. So
that would be the second driver, yes.
But I think the main ones for us were that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to offer courses online which mirror what's available in the classroom and give students a more flexible learning offering. They can do it at home, they can do it in the library, they can come to the class. It's not absolutely flipped classroom in all cases, but our MOOCs are absolute perfect mirror versions of the on-campus courses and offer this sort of
Great.
alternative.
Okay, so now that is you have talked about the MOOCs at a strategic level and
Yeah.
institutional level, and from what you have observed,
Yeah.
what is the reaction of the lecturers, of the staff, not only those who participate in MOOCs, but those who hear that there are MOOCs in their university?
Yeah.
So, because this is a very broad question,
It is.
could you divide in your head? Could you divide them in groups of people who say there are many people who don't care, there are many people who are very enthusiasts, there are not so many people who have this feeling about whatever. So could you please divide them in groups?
Well, I think you've answered the
And-
question for me, because I would say that we have the first group of professors who came.
How big do you see them? Yeah,
Perhaps
in
about
comparison.
20%.
Okay, in comparison with what
I would say
with
it's
one
a
another. Yeah.
goodish number. I think the group who came forward are the enthusiastic, maybe innovators, but also, I hope I'm allowed to say this, I actually think they're very good. And they know that they're very good. A lot of them are big personalities. They attract a crowd in the lecture theatre, and in the online environment, they look good, they sound good, and they've got a lot of presence. And I think it's easier to be, this is me now, but I think it's easier to be a MOOC teacher, to do lecture capture, to do an online course, when you know that in front of a camera you perform, you know how to perform, you know how to speak to an audience. Some of these people have been on telly, have been on the radio, have been on, they're kind of big, and they're not scared. There's another group who, a little bit more fearful of the idea that maybe their role is going to be usurped by this new form of online learning, and so they're resistant to change. It's a sort of classic situation. That'll encourage people not to come to class, that'll encourage standards to drop, that'll encourage... and then you've got some people, I think, in the middle who are tentatively experimenting, because also, don't forget that in the middle group, you can also have the people who use a MOOC, which they didn't actually author. Yeah, so you can have blended or flipped mode, using with you, sort of teacher of that course, using somebody else's MOOC as a kind of textbook for variety and interest, bit of innovation.
Okay, thank you. So different attitudes, different approaches, and different reactions to the arrival of MOOCs in
Exactly.
the university, and some more than others. That's perfect. So now the work dynamics at the university, the communities of practice that have been formed when MOOCs have arrived. Have you noticed any change or any new interactions or any new teamwork dynamics? Have you noticed anything like that?
Well, because we're fortunate enough here at this university to have a university centre for online learning, then there's a bit of a sort of special interest group that has arisen around us, and with the professors who are doing the MOOCs, but perhaps not as much as I'd hoped. Perhaps
Okay, could you please elaborate that?
they've done, they kind of did it once and then did a revised version of it, but I'm not quite sure whether they're as enthusiastic as we are in the whole concept and and all the different ramifications. We were talking about that today, weren't we? That there is no, there's no one MOOC model, and yet here we have a template and a very a very good template, But there's all kinds of things outside that template that individuals can vary, and there could be a lot of discussion around that, and I'm not sure that's really happening yet.
Okay, so we have talked about yourself a little bit. You have about your experience. Now we have talked about what do you see in your university at a strategic and institutional level. We have also talked about what do you see in individuals' perceptions and attitudes towards MOOCs. And now we are moving to the last and probably longest section, and it's all about how MOOCs have made an impact, even in the skills and capabilities of and competencies of teachers here in this institution, and we are going to do this by mapping it against an excellence framework, a professional standards framework, which is the UK PSF,
Right.
the UK Professional Standards Framework that I'm going to pull out. We're going to look at it together. We're going to read at some of the descriptors and some of the dimensions, and we are going to make some comments on it.
Okay.
So, the framework touches on 3 areas of activity, very similar to many of the definitions of what competencies are.
Yeah.
Areas of activity, that would be the skills,
Yeah.
yes, core knowledge, that would be the knowledge, and professional values would be the attitudes and values. Okay, so these have got a few descriptors in each dimension, and for purposes of structure and analysis of this interview, we are going to go one by one. We may not approach them all, but we will improvise as to which ones we choose, because we have them, both of us. We have them all in front of us.
Okay.
I would like anyway to start with A1.
Yeah.
Design and plan learning activities and or programs of study. What have you observed when training or when helping them develop MOOCs or when talking to them? What have you
Well, I
observed?
think MOOCs improve this aspect of teacher activity. I said before, we're very much, sort of public rather than private. So we don't have very much in the way of the customer survey satisfaction surveys for our students and stuff. We don't have a system. We don't have the sort of systematic observation and marking of our performance as teachers. And this is speaking for myself, I think you can get lazy when you know that nobody's checking up
Obviously,
on you.
Yeah.
You're very much free to go in there and do what you like. I don't have performance indicators to respect particularly. The only one perhaps is that the students get through the exam, but then I write the exam and I examine the students. So in a sense, it's a bit of a sort of closed shop. Planning a MOOC, an 8-week or a 9-week MOOC with a template, imposing the submission of a syllabus well in advance, imposing the selection of a certain amount of learning activities to incorporate beyond the lecture capture. Talking heads lecture sort of video, and selection of activities, exercises, tasks. I think the MOOCs do a lot to focus your mind on the objectives, the specific learning objectives, and how you might choose to help your students achieve those objectives.
Yes, that is great because you have said that this is even more true in universities where performance indicators are not so much in place as in other countries or in other university systems. Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe even in the state school where we have Ofsted inspections and all that kind of stuff. It's a little bit more.
So how about the assessment and feedback? that is served to learners, is there any reflective or are teachers rethinking the way they provide, assess, and get feedback to learners as a result of having been involved in developing a MOOC?
Well, I think that's a possibility. When you do, let's say, assignments rather than, the quizzes that are marked just automatically or they're very easy to mark, but on an assignment kind of assessment, the feedback is written and public sometimes, or even peer reviewed.
Yeah.
And I think in both cases, the fact that it's lasting, that it's in black and white and lasting, has made people reflect very much on tone, on what's essential in giving feedback. Let's not be too pernickety about the small things, but let's, from the outset, set the parameters for the feedback that we want to give. What do I really want people to learn from doing this assignment, and how can I see whether they really have learned what they were intended to learn, and if they haven't, how can my feedback constructively enable them to improve their performance on the same task next time? And again, I think that the online learning environment brings these issues much more to the fore, just because it's all lasting, it's always all there, and you don't want to be caught saying anything that's not constructive, that's mean, ill thought out. I don't know.
So it helps. Right. Now I'm thinking of moving to the next dimension, unless you have seen any descriptor here that you would like to emphasize. So we have talked about designing and planning learning activities and assessing and giving feedback. There are 3 more, and unless you are particularly interested in mentioning one of those, we could.
Well, perhaps just very, very briefly, you see, the approaches to student support, I would say that here that's quite difficult because obviously the MOOC is prepared in advance, then it's available online, but the actual, the additional things like setting up some kind of communication network, some kind of virtual classroom, some kind of forum, that's quite difficult because not all the big VIP members of faculty have the time or the inclination to do more than the MOOC itself, and so they tend to employ. They tend to have a junior.
Employ exactly.
They have
to
sort
use.
of to use. Yes, thank you. They use junior, maybe PhDs if we're lucky, but students, which sometimes works out really well, but sometimes the assistants are not given the guidance that they might need, because after all, it's not so easy to manage virtual learning environments. It's not, for me, it's not a given that you know how to either encourage, facilitate, engage, motivate, guide. There's a lot of different roles that the online tutor needs to have, and not having the subject knowledge makes it even more difficult to carry out that role successfely.
Shall we move to the next dimension?
Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, you are not. Absolutely, yeah. We can take more than half an hour if needed. Every minute more is more value to my to my research. So the core knowledge about is how knowledgeable are the teachers about these 6 different descriptors, and let's imagine there's a teacher who has been involved in a MOOC in, say, physics or whatever, and do you think, or have you observed, that they gain any more knowledge in the subject material, either by expansion or by consolidation?
They, the teachers?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
No. No, I think that Italian professors, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of subject knowledge, the core knowledge, are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have it anyway.
They have it
Yeah.
anyway, and they are not going to gain it by having been involved in a MOOC.
No, they do all kinds of research, and they're very, very, very intelligent, our professors. It takes a long time to get to that level, but they're very good.
Yeah, perfect. Appropriate methods for teaching, learning, and assessing in the subject area and at the level of the academic program. Do you think they gain anything, or they are also so knowledgeable that?
Well, this one's a difficult one, isn't it? Because how long is a piece of string? I mean, you know, since they are the ones who determine the content of the syllabus and the parameters for the exam, and write the exams and do the exams, then I would say no, because they've said it.
Mm-hmm. And how about whether they incur or they come across any discovery on how students
That
learn?
would say yes. Yes, I think sometimes I think that's been a bit of a revelation. I think it's been really interesting. Some professors.
We are talking about how students learn, both generally and within their subject disciplinary areas.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, but yes, I think some professors who've used the MOOCs in sort of flipped mode discovered to their surprise about how group work and project work could be really successful, and how I think it's easier to get to know your class in flipped mode. Very often, delivery modes in a lecture theatre don't really enable the professor perhaps to get to know the students as individuals, and I think a lot more comes out, and certain characters come out, and the learning. So learning through doing, learning in groups, learning through more independent research and being able to present it to the class. All those kind of things I don't think were taking place before.
So this is what they know about it, and this is out of this dimension. But it's do you have you seen any? Have you witnessed any one of these teachers who have taken this back to their day-to-day practice?
Yeah.
Effectively.
Yeah, one or two. I mean, obviously, I don't really have. It's more, I think they have, because I don't really. But I'm not really able to go in and knock on the door and watch.
The door. And are you using it or not?
Yeah, observe. But my feeling is that a few, yes.
Okay, yes. About the use and value of appropriate learning technologies, do you think they are more spot on now on the technologies that they use in the classroom or in?
I think there's a lot of individual variation here still. In one of our MOOCs, there was one of the teacher training MOOCs that was on the Emma platform. I saw this guy using Padlet for class introduction, using all kinds of little things, very, very effectively. I think we're getting better on the macro, but I think we've still got a way to go.
In the micro and in the day-to-day, and obviously. Self-reflection and evaluation of their own teaching. Do you think they self-reflect more and they assess more their own teaching and the effectiveness of how they teach?
Gosh, that I don't know. As Mark West said this morning, you know, higher education institutions in the world, but in Europe too, do not have a good track record for really monitoring the effectiveness of what they do. And that's at the institutional level, but it's also at the level of individual teachers. You get, of course, pockets of excellence, and you get people who tend to be more self-reflecting. But if that's a sort of general phenomenon, I don't know. I think personally that performance management and classroom observation goes a long way towards actually encouraging a more self-reflective approach to teaching. And if you don't have that, I think it's quite easy to teach for 20 years
the same way.
It's possible.
It's possible, and there's no one who's going to stop you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, I mean, it's not what, you know, blanket, but.
Shall we move
Okay.
to the last dimension? Professional values, attitudes, behaviors, way of being. Yeah. The savoir-être.
Yeah.
Do you think they have made any difference? MOOCs have made any difference in which teachers and academics respect individual learners and diverse learning communities?
Yes, I think that refers back to my previous point about, you know, in a flipped classroom, so the content's been done at home and then you have the discussion or the project work or the tasks. And I think that has increased respect for individual learners rather than for a class.
The second scripture is related, actually, to promote participation in higher education and equality of opportunity for learners. So, do you think there's been anyone in your conversations with these teachers, anyone who thinks more about why education should be more inclusive and should be more should be for more people or for a wider range of people than it is at the moment?
I find that one quite difficult, in my opinion, but I'm English. Because our MOOCs mirror the on-campus course, the standard for me is quite high, and I don't think the attitude is very inclusive. Although a MOOC is open to everybody in theory, I think that we have quite high standards, and a lot of people just wouldn't or couldn't.
It doesn't mean it will reach everyone.
Get interested in that sort of level of specificness and quality as well. They're very academic. You know, they're like real stuff. But
how about 4? Acknowledge the wider context in which higher education operates, recognizing the implication for professional practice. For an emphasis on the wider context beyond the walls of the university.
I think MOOCs are brilliant for this. I mean, as soon as you go online and, you know, open access, you're very aware that you're in some way, you know, carrying the banner of the university. You're part of the branding. You're part of the internationalization. And so that's quite, you know, that's quite an important role to have. And I think everybody's quite conscious of that. And B, I think because they sign up to be a part of an open access movement, open education resource, you know, they're putting themselves on the line very generously because they want to share what they do with a wider community of learners. And I think that's admirable and says a lot about people's attitudes to education as a social good and an opportunity for others.
Okay, and finally, having discussed these 3 dimensions, to what extent do you think this is self-selective to the teachers that we have been talking about? So we have said that in some ways, when MOOCs came to the university, that has made a difference, certain difference in the way teachers and academics think about education and think about how they teach.
Yeah.
Do you, and I repeat, to what extent do you think they came already with these attitudes, or to what extent do you think their attitudes have actually changed? So an example would be, yeah, I'm interested in doing MOOCs because I'm already self-reflective. I'm already good at. I have quite solid knowledge of my subject material.
I think that's it. I think that they're self-selecting in terms of people who know they have the core knowledge. You know, they know they're international experts in the field, and people are going to be interested in listening to them. And I think also confidence. You know, I mentioned that before, but I think our best MOOC teachers are those who have quite a lot of presence. What do you call it? Charisma.
Yeah, gravitas as well.
Yeah. And so, but I think it's. I think they increased in those in the other qualities as time went on through the MOOC program. I do think it. And they did. I mean, you know, they do. They go on the Federica platform, and Federico II knows the Federica platform, so it's bound to have a knockdown effect. Slowly, but a trickle down, and we're getting more and more people every year who want to do a MOOC. So we've had different phases, different rounds, and whereas in the first, what I said about, you know, the bigwigs, whereas they might have come forward in the first round, but then as time has gone on, then we've had more and more applicants to make a MOOC. So
who initially wouldn't have thought about it.
No, I'm sure they wouldn't. No. And I think, you know, they've seen how much it's appreciated, and all that stuff about it being for the greater good.
Great. Do you have anything else to add about this conversation, especially the last part of the interview?
Well, I still feel we haven't said very much about the training that might be needed, and I think in some ways, something that we a small project but an interesting one was using some of our teacher training experience in different fields, because I used to work on English language teacher training, and we imported some of those ideas, you know, because in English language training there's quite a lot about classroom management, classroom presence, setting up diverse activities so that the class doesn't get boring.
I taught English for academic purposes out of writing, so I had to do a lot of classroom management to keep the students
exactly, working in pairs and groups, and organising the feedback after tasks and all that sort of stuff. So we imported some of that and created a small course for the teaching assistants who are going to be the online tutors, and tried. It wasn't very successful, but I think it was an interesting experiment. That's
a good start.
And perhaps worth carrying on. And then we also had somebody in the team here, in the MOOC production team, who was quite good at. It was not like acting skills, but just a bit about how to be in front of the camera, just kind of advice on performing to the camera, which was also really useful, and you could see the improvements.
No, that is great, especially in terms of training. We are also trying to write a kind of teaching assistant or MOOC mentor handbook.
That would be ideal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is, in the end, I think I would consider this a success.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop recording now.
Thank you, Manuel.